You must train yourself to be indifferent to what others say or do. Marcus Aurelius. Most people think reacting quickly is a strength. They believe the faster you respond, the better. This is a dangerous illusion. It's the reflex of a cornered animal, not the calculated move of a strategist. Reacting puts you on the defensive, controlled by someone else's actions. True power lies in strategic indifference. It's the ability to remain calm and unbothered, even when provoked. To see the bigger picture, while others are blinded by immediate events. Strategic indifference isn't about being lazy or unaware. It's about focusing your energy on what truly matters. Most things are distractions designed to pull you off course. The news cycle, social media arguments, petty dramas, these are all traps. They demand your attention, hijack your emotions, and drain your resources. By refusing to engage, you conserve your mental space and maintain clarity. You become a fortress, impervious to the noise. The emotionally reactive person is predictable. Their buttons are easily pushed, their actions easily anticipated. This makes them vulnerable to manipulation. A strategist, however, is an enigma. Their motives are concealed, their reactions delayed or non-existent. This creates uncertainty in their opponents, forcing them to second-guess themselves. Strategic indifference is a weapon of psychological warfare. It disrupts the enemy's plans and sows seeds of doubt. Consider the chess grandmaster. They don't react to every pawn move with frantic energy. They assess the entire board, calculate the long-term consequences, and choose their moves with deliberate precision. They understand that sometimes the best move is no move at all. To passively observe as your opponent makes errors, allowing them to self-destruct through their own impatience. This is the essence of strategic indifference. The key is to detach yourself from the outcome of individual events. Focus instead on the overall trajectory. Accept that setbacks are inevitable. Learn from them, adapt, and continue moving forward. Don't let temporary failures derail your long-term goals. Strategic indifference requires a certain level of detachment. It's the ability to see the world from a distance without getting caught up in the emotional whirlwind. Think of a river flowing around a rock. The rock doesn't fight the current. It simply remains still and allows the water to flow around it. Over time, the water erodes the rock, slowly but surely reshaping it. This is a metaphor for strategic indifference in action. Don't waste your energy resisting the inevitable. Instead, adapt to the circumstances and use them to your advantage. The long game is won not by force, but by patience and persistence. Strategic indifference is not about apathy. It's about calculated inaction. It's about choosing your battles wisely and conserving your energy for the moments that truly matter. It's about understanding that sometimes the greatest strength lies in doing nothing at all. By mastering this skill, you can gain a significant advantage in any situation. You will become a force to be reckoned with, a strategist who is always one step ahead. The world rewards those who think, not those who merely react. The psychology of strategic indifference runs counter to our natural impulses. We are wired to react, to defend, to immediately address perceived threats or injustices. This instinct served us well in simpler times, when survival depended on quick reflexes and decisive action. But in the modern world, dominated by complex systems and long-term consequences, impulsive behavior is often counterproductive. Strategic indifference, on the other hand, requires overriding this primal programming. It demands a conscious effort to resist the urge to react emotionally, to instead analyze the situation objectively and determine the most advantageous course of action. This involves cultivating a degree of self-control that is rare and highly valuable. Consider the stock market, a prime example of a system driven by fear and greed. Novice investors often panic during market downturns, selling their holdings at a loss based on short-term anxieties. The strategically indifferent investor, however, recognizes that market fluctuations are a normal part of the cycle. They understand that trying to time the market is a fool's errand. Instead, they focus on the long-term fundamentals of the companies they invest in, ignoring the noise of daily price swings. This detachment allows them to make rational decisions, buying when others are selling and selling when others are buying, ultimately reaping the rewards of their patience and discipline. The capacity to remain calm under pressure is paramount. This ability to detach emotionally doesn't imply a lack of empathy or concern for others. It simply means recognizing that emotional reactions can cloud judgment and lead to poor decisions. A strategically indifferent leader, for example, can make difficult choices, such as laying off employees or closing down a failing division, not because they are callous or uncaring, but because they understand that these actions are necessary to ensure the long-term survival and success of the organization. They are able to separate their personal feelings from the objective needs of the situation, prioritizing the greater good over short-term emotional considerations. The ability to see beyond the immediate pain and focus on the future is the mark of a true strategist. The practice of mindfulness meditation can be a powerful tool for cultivating strategic indifference. By training the mind to observe thoughts and emotions without judgment, one can learn to create a space between stimulus and response. This allows for a more deliberate and considered reaction, rather than a knee-jerk reaction driven by impulse. Mindfulness also helps to develop a greater awareness of one's own biases and emotional triggers, making it easier to identify situations where strategic indifference is required. It's a process of mental conditioning, akin to training a muscle, strengthening the ability to resist emotional reactivity. Through mindful awareness, one develops an internal observatory, watching the currents of the mind without being swept away by them. Furthermore, strategic indifference involves a deep understanding of game theory, the study of strategic decision-making in situations where the outcome depends on the choices of multiple actors. Game theory provides a framework for analyzing situations objectively, identifying potential strategies, and predicting the likely outcomes based on the actions of others. By understanding the principles of game theory, one can make more informed decisions, anticipate the moves of opponents, and develop strategies that maximize their own chances of success. It allows you to think several steps ahead, considering all possible scenarios and preparing for any eventuality. This is not about being manipulative, but about being prepared and informed. A key component of strategic indifference is embracing the concept of calculated risk. This doesn't mean taking reckless chances, but rather carefully assessing the potential rewards and risks of each course of action and making decisions based on a rational analysis of the situation. It involves understanding that every decision carries a degree of uncertainty, and that there is no such thing as a guaranteed outcome. The strategically indifferent actor is comfortable with this uncertainty, accepting that setbacks are inevitable and focusing on the long-term probability of success. They understand that playing it safe is often the riskiest strategy of all, as it can lead to missed opportunities and long-term stagnation. The courage to act decisively, even in the face of uncertainty, is a defining characteristic. Strategic indifference also necessitates a certain level of self-reliance. It's about trusting your own judgment and not being swayed by the opinions of others. This doesn't mean ignoring advice or feedback, but rather carefully considering all available information and making decisions based on your own independent analysis. It requires a strong sense of self-confidence and a willingness to go against the grain, even when faced with opposition. The ability to stand alone, to hold firm to your convictions in the face of adversity, is essential for long-term success. This inner strength is the bedrock upon which strategic advantage is built. In essence, strategic indifference is a powerful tool for navigating the complexities of the modern world. It's about cultivating a mindset of detachment, rationality, and long-term thinking. It's about choosing your battles wisely, conserving your energy for the moments that truly matter, and trusting your own judgment. By mastering this skill, you can gain a significant advantage in any situation, becoming a force to be reckoned with, a strategist who is always one step ahead. It is the path to consistent, long-term achievement, a framework for navigating the chaos and emerging victorious. It empowers you to control your destiny rather than being controlled by it. Consider the ruthless world of corporate acquisitions. Imagine two companies vying for control of a smaller, strategically important firm. Company A launches an aggressive bid, publicly declaring its intention to acquire the target at any cost. Their strategy is one of overwhelming force, a demonstration of financial might designed to intimidate the competition and sway the target company's shareholders. They engage in a media blitz, painting a picture of inevitable success, attempting to create a bandwagon effect. They react to every countermove by Company B with swift and forceful responses, escalating the bidding war and driving up the acquisition price. Their emotional investment becomes clear. They must win this deal, regardless of the long-term consequences. Company B, on the other hand, adopts a posture of strategic indifference. They acknowledge the value of the target company, but refuse to be drawn into a bidding war. They carefully analyze Company A's moves, assessing the true strategic value of the target in light of the escalating price. They recognize that Company A's emotional attachment to the deal has blinded them to the potential risks. Company B remains calm and detached, refusing to be pressured by public opinion or the frantic pace of the acquisition process. They quietly explore alternative options, identifying other potential targets that may offer similar strategic advantages at a lower cost. They understand that the goal is not to win this particular battle, but to win the larger war for market dominance. They maintain a clear focus on their long-term objectives, refusing to be distracted by short-term gains or emotional impulses. As the bidding war intensifies, Company A becomes increasingly desperate, overpaying for the target company and saddling itself with debt. Their victory proves to be a Pyrrhic one, leaving them weakened and vulnerable. Company B, meanwhile, patiently waits for its opportunity, strategically redeploying its resources to capitalize on Company A's weakened position. In the end, Company B achieves its long-term goals, not by winning every battle, but by choosing its battles wisely and maintaining a posture of strategic indifference to the emotional distractions of the moment. They understood that the true measure of success is not the immediate gratification of a single victory, but the long-term accumulation of strategic advantages. This calculated approach allows them to thrive where others falter, demonstrating the power of detachment in the high-stakes world of corporate strategy. The ability to resist the allure of immediate gratification and focus on the long-term consequences is a hallmark of strategic thinking, a key to unlocking sustained success in any competitive environment. It is the understanding that sometimes the greatest victory lies in walking away. The psychology behind this is crucial. Company A, driven by ego and a need for immediate validation, falls victim to the sunk cost fallacy. They've invested so much time, energy, and capital into the acquisition that they feel compelled to see it through, even when the rational course of action would be to abandon the deal. They become trapped in a cycle of escalation, blinded by their emotional attachment to the outcome. Company B, in contrast, remains objective and rational, treating the acquisition as a purely strategic decision. They are willing to walk away if the price becomes too high, recognizing that there are other opportunities to achieve their goals. They understand that their reputation and long-term success are more important than winning any single deal. This detachment allows them to make clear-headed decisions, free from the biases and emotional pressures that cloud the judgment of their competitor. Their strategic indifference is not a sign of weakness, but a source of strength, enabling them to navigate the complexities of the market with clarity and precision. This is the essence of calculated risk, understanding when to push forward and when to retreat, knowing that every decision has consequences that extend far beyond the immediate moment. It's about mastering the art of delayed gratification, recognizing that true success is built on a foundation of patience, discipline, and an unwavering focus on long-term goals. The trap is sprung when the weak equate activity with progress. They mistake the relentless pursuit of a single objective with strategic brilliance, failing to see the broader landscape of opportunities and threats. This myopic focus blinds them to the changing conditions, the rising costs, and the diminishing returns. They become slaves to their initial plan, unwilling to deviate even when presented with overwhelming evidence that it is no longer viable. Their ego prevents them from admitting mistakes, clinging to the illusion of control even as their position deteriorates. This rigid adherence to a flawed strategy is a hallmark of the amateur, a clear indication of their inability to adapt and evolve. The truly strategic player understands that plans are merely guidelines, subject to revision and even abandonment in the face of new information. They are willing to cut their losses, pivot their approach, and pursue alternative paths to achieve their desired outcome. Their flexibility is their strength, allowing them to capitalize on unforeseen opportunities and mitigate unexpected risks. They recognize that the market is a dynamic environment, constantly shifting and evolving, and that only those who can adapt will survive. This adaptability is not simply a matter of reacting to events, but of anticipating them, of proactively shaping the environment to their advantage. They understand that the best defense is often a good offense, and they are always looking for ways to disrupt the status quo and gain a competitive edge. The weak, however, are content to remain in their comfort zone, clinging to familiar strategies and resisting change. They are afraid to take risks, to venture into the unknown, and to challenge the established order. This fear paralyzes them, preventing them from seizing opportunities and leaving them vulnerable to attack. They become sitting ducks, waiting to be picked off by more agile and aggressive competitors. Their strategic indifference is not a calculated choice, but a reflection of their inherent weakness, their inability to think strategically and act decisively. This weakness stems from a fundamental misunderstanding of the game. They see it as a series of isolated battles, rather than a complex and interconnected system. They focus on winning individual skirmishes, without considering the long-term consequences of their actions. They fail to appreciate the importance of building alliances, cultivating relationships, and creating a sustainable competitive advantage. Their short-sightedness ultimately leads to their downfall. They may achieve some short-term successes, but they are inevitably outmaneuvered and outlasted by those who have a deeper understanding of the game. The strong, in contrast, see the game as a whole, understanding that every move has a ripple effect that extends far beyond the immediate moment. They are masters of long-term planning, anticipating future trends and positioning themselves to capitalize on them. They are patient, disciplined, and unwavering in their pursuit of their goals. They understand that success is not a sprint, but a marathon, and that it requires a sustained effort over time. They are willing to make sacrifices in the short term to achieve greater gains in the long term. Their strategic indifference is not a sign of apathy, but a reflection of their unwavering focus on their ultimate objective. They are willing to ignore distractions, resist temptations, and walk away from opportunities that do not align with their long-term goals. Their discipline is their superpower, enabling them to stay the course even when faced with adversity. The weak, lacking this discipline, are easily swayed by emotions, seduced by short-term gains, and distracted by irrelevant details. They are like ships without rudders, tossed about by the winds of circumstance, never able to reach their intended destination. The strategic indifference of the strong is not born of arrogance, but of a profound understanding of priorities. It is the ability to filter the noise, to discern the signal from the chaos, and to allocate resources accordingly. Every choice involves a trade-off, and the strong are willing to make the difficult choices that others avoid. They understand that saying yes to everything means saying no to what truly matters. They guard their time, energy, and attention with ruthless efficiency, recognizing that these are finite resources that must be deployed strategically. They are not afraid to disappoint others, to say no to requests, or to decline opportunities that do not align with their overarching goals. This may be perceived as cold or calculating, but it is simply a reflection of their commitment to achieving their objectives. They understand that popularity is fleeting, but results are permanent. They are not seeking to win a popularity contest, but to achieve lasting success. The weak, in contrast, are driven by a need to be liked, to be accepted, and to avoid conflict. They are afraid to say no, to set boundaries, or to assert their own needs. They spread themselves too thin, trying to please everyone and ending up pleasing no one. They are constantly reacting to the demands of others, rather than proactively pursuing their own goals. Their desire for approval becomes a prison, limiting their freedom and preventing them from reaching their full potential. They become slaves to the opinions of others, sacrificing their own ambitions on the altar of social acceptance. Strategic indifference also extends to the emotional realm. The strong do not allow their emotions to cloud their judgment or to dictate their actions. They recognize that emotions are powerful forces, but they are not always reliable guides. They cultivate emotional detachment, observing their own feelings with a degree of objectivity and refusing to be swept away by them. This does not mean that they are devoid of emotions, but that they are able to control their emotions rather than being controlled by them. They are able to remain calm and rational in the face of adversity, to think clearly under pressure, and to make sound decisions even when they are feeling stressed or anxious. The weak, on the other hand, are slaves to their emotions. They are easily angered, frustrated, or discouraged. They allow their feelings to dictate their actions, often making impulsive decisions that they later regret. They are unable to control their emotions, and as a result, they are easily manipulated by others. They become victims of their own emotional volatility, sabotaging their own efforts and undermining their own success. Strategic indifference also involves a willingness to accept uncertainty and to embrace risk. The strong understand that the future is unpredictable and that no plan is foolproof. They are willing to take calculated risks, to experiment with new ideas, and to adapt to changing circumstances. They are not afraid of failure, recognizing that failure is an inevitable part of the learning process. They view setbacks as opportunities for growth, extracting valuable lessons from their mistakes and using them to improve their future performance. The weak, in contrast, are risk-averse and afraid of failure. They cling to the familiar, avoiding anything that might challenge their comfort zone. They are paralyzed by fear, unable to make decisions or to take action. They are constantly seeking guarantees, but in a world of uncertainty, guarantees are impossible to find. Their fear of failure becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, preventing them from ever achieving their full potential. The strong also possess the ability to delay gratification. They understand that true success requires patience, discipline, and a long-term perspective. They are willing to make sacrifices in the short term to achieve greater gains in the long term. They are not seduced by instant gratification, recognizing that fleeting pleasures often come at a high price. They are able to resist temptation, to stay focused on their goals, and to persevere through challenges. The weak, in contrast, are driven by a desire for immediate gratification. They are unable to delay gratification, always seeking the quickest and easiest path to pleasure. They are easily distracted by temptations, sacrificing their long-term goals for short-term gains. They lack the discipline to stay the course, constantly jumping from one thing to another, never achieving anything of lasting value. Their inability to delay gratification becomes a major obstacle to their success, preventing them from ever realizing their full potential. The application of strategic indifference extends to their relationships as well. The strong are selective about who they associate with, understanding that they are the average of the 5 people they spend the most time with. They surround themselves with individuals who are intelligent, ambitious, and supportive. They avoid those who are negative, draining, or toxic. They understand that relationships are a two-way street, and they are willing to invest time and energy in cultivating strong, mutually beneficial relationships. The weak, in contrast, often surround themselves with people who are equally weak and insecure. They seek validation from others, clinging to relationships that are based on superficiality and codependency. They are afraid to be alone, constantly seeking the approval of others. They become entangled in toxic relationships, draining their energy and undermining their self-esteem. Their inability to choose their relationships wisely becomes a major obstacle to their success, preventing them from ever realizing their full potential. In essence, strategic indifference is a form of mental toughness, a resilience that allows the strong to weather storms and emerge stronger than before. It is not a lack of caring, but a disciplined allocation of caring, directed towards what truly matters. It is the ability to say no to the good in order to say yes to the great. It is the hallmark of a strategic mind, a mind that understands the long game and is willing to play it with patience, discipline, and unwavering focus. The ultimate expression of strategic indifference is the ability to walk away, to know when a battle is not worth fighting, and to conserve resources for a more strategic engagement. This is not cowardice, but wisdom. History is replete with examples of empires and military leaders who achieved victory through strategic indifference. Consider the Roman Empire, a civilization that rose to dominate the Mediterranean world through a calculated blend of military might and political acumen. The Romans understood the importance of prioritizing their resources, focusing their attention on strategic objectives, while remaining indifferent to minor conflicts or distractions. They were not afraid to abandon territory or withdraw forces if it served their long-term interests. Their indifference to short-term losses allowed them to consolidate their power, expand their influence, and ultimately build an empire that lasted for centuries. This strategic calculus extended to their treatment of conquered peoples. While the Romans could be ruthless in suppressing rebellions, they also recognized the value of assimilation and integration. They offered citizenship to conquered elites, incorporated local customs into their own culture, and invested in infrastructure projects that benefited the entire empire. This blend of force and diplomacy, of strategic aggression and calculated indifference, was a key factor in their success. The ability to distinguish between vital interests and peripheral concerns allowed them to allocate their resources effectively, avoid unnecessary conflicts, and maintain control over a vast and diverse territory. Conversely, empires that failed to embrace strategic indifference often met with disaster. The Spanish Empire, for example, became overextended in the 16th and 17th centuries, attempting to control vast territories across the globe. They became entangled in numerous conflicts, from the Netherlands to the Americas, stretching their resources thin and weakening their grip on power. Their refusal to prioritize their objectives, their inability to say no to costly ventures, ultimately led to their decline. They were unable to strategically triage their problems, dealing with every minor uprising as an existential threat. This reactive, emotionally driven approach drained their coffers and eroded their military strength, leaving them vulnerable to their rivals. The Spanish Empire's decline serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of overextension and the importance of strategic focus. Similarly, in the realm of military strategy, indifference can be a powerful weapon. A skilled general understands that not every battle is worth fighting, and that sometimes the wisest course of action is to withdraw, regroup, and strike at a more opportune moment. Consider the example of General George Washington during the American Revolutionary War. Washington was consistently outmatched by the British Army in terms of manpower, equipment, and training. Yet he managed to lead the Continental Army to victory by employing a strategy of attrition and strategic retreat. Washington understood that he could not defeat the British in a direct confrontation, so he avoided large-scale battles whenever possible. Instead, he focused on harassing the British forces, disrupting their supply lines, and wearing them down over time. He was willing to cede territory, to retreat from seemingly hopeless situations, knowing that the survival of his army was paramount. His indifference to short-term losses allowed him to preserve his forces, maintain morale, and ultimately wear down the British will to fight. This strategic patience, this willingness to endure setbacks in pursuit of a larger goal, was a key factor in the American victory. The ability to remain indifferent to the noise and distractions of the battlefield is also crucial for maintaining focus and making sound decisions. A commander who is overwhelmed by emotion, who is constantly reacting to every threat and opportunity, will quickly lose sight of the bigger picture. A skilled leader, on the other hand, can remain calm and collected under pressure, assessing the situation objectively and making decisions based on logic and reason. This requires a degree of detachment, an ability to distance oneself from the immediate chaos and focus on the strategic objectives. It is not about being uncaring or insensitive, but about maintaining a clear head and avoiding emotional traps. The best military leaders understand that war is a complex and unpredictable game, and that success requires a combination of skill, strategy, and mental fortitude. Strategic indifference, the ability to prioritize, to focus, and to remain calm under pressure, is an essential ingredient in that mix. It is the difference between a general who reacts to events and a general who shapes them. The psychology of strategic indifference is rooted in the understanding that emotions, while powerful motivators, can also be debilitating distractions. A leader consumed by anger, fear, or even excessive enthusiasm risks clouding their judgment and acting impulsively. True strategic thinking requires a degree of detachment, an ability to observe the situation from a distance, analyze the various factors at play, and make decisions based on calculated probability rather than gut feeling. This is not to suggest that emotions should be entirely suppressed, but rather that they should be acknowledged and managed. A skilled strategist understands that their own emotional state is a variable that needs to be accounted for, just like any other element of the battlefield. They are aware of their own biases and tendencies, and they take steps to mitigate their influence on the decision-making process. This might involve seeking counsel from trusted advisors, employing analytical techniques to assess the situation objectively, or simply taking a moment to breathe and clear their head before acting. Strategic indifference is not about being emotionless. It's about being in control of your emotions, using them as information rather than allowing them to dictate your actions. This ability to maintain composure under pressure is closely linked to the concept of mental resilience. A resilient leader is able to withstand setbacks and failures without losing sight of their goals. They understand that defeat is not necessarily permanent, and that even in the face of adversity, there is always an opportunity to learn and adapt. They are able to bounce back from disappointments, to maintain a positive outlook, and to continue pushing forward with renewed determination. Strategic indifference plays a crucial role in this process. By not allowing themselves to be consumed by negative emotions, such as despair or self-doubt, resilient leaders are able to maintain their focus and continue to make sound decisions. They understand that setbacks are inevitable, but that they do not have to define the outcome. They are able to compartmentalize their emotions, to acknowledge the pain and disappointment, but to move beyond it and focus on the task at hand. This requires a strong sense of self-belief and a deep commitment to their goals. It is the ability to maintain a long-term perspective, to see beyond the immediate challenges, and to remain focused on the ultimate objective. Furthermore, strategic indifference necessitates a willingness to delegate and trust in the abilities of others. A leader who micromanages every detail, who is constantly second-guessing their subordinates, will quickly become overwhelmed and ineffective. True leadership requires the ability to empower others, to give them the resources and autonomy they need to succeed, and to trust them to carry out their responsibilities. This is not to say that a leader should be completely hands-off, but rather that they should focus on setting the overall strategy and providing guidance and support, rather than getting bogged down in the minutiae. Strategic indifference in this context means being willing to relinquish control, to accept that things will not always go exactly as planned, and to trust that your team is capable of handling unexpected challenges. It requires a degree of humility, an acknowledgement that you cannot do everything yourself, and that you need to rely on the expertise and judgment of others. It also requires a strong sense of confidence in your own ability to select and train competent individuals. Strategic indifference is also closely tied to the ability to anticipate future events and to prepare for different scenarios. A proactive leader is constantly thinking ahead, considering the potential consequences of their actions, and developing contingency plans to address any unforeseen challenges. This requires a deep understanding of the underlying dynamics of the situation, as well as the ability to model different outcomes and to assess their relative probabilities. Strategic indifference in this context means being willing to invest time and resources in planning and preparation, even when there is no immediate threat. It means being willing to consider uncomfortable possibilities and to develop strategies to mitigate their impact. It also means being willing to adapt your plans as new information becomes available. A strategic leader understands that the future is uncertain and that the best way to prepare for it is to be flexible and adaptable. They are constantly learning and evolving, refining their strategies and adjusting their tactics as the situation changes. This requires a commitment to continuous improvement and a willingness to embrace new ideas and approaches. Strategic indifference, therefore, is not a passive state of apathy, but an active and deliberate approach to leadership that is characterized by foresight, resilience, and a deep understanding of human psychology. It is a critical ingredient for success in any complex and challenging environment. Strategic indifference, when wielded correctly, transforms into an almost supernatural ability to detach from the noise and focus on the signal. Consider, for instance, the ruthless efficiency of a corporate turnaround artist. A newly appointed CEO, brought in to salvage a failing company, often embodies this principle perfectly. They inherit a situation rife with emotional attachments, long-serving employees fearful for their jobs, executives clinging to outdated strategies, and a culture resistant to change. A CEO mired in empathy, paralyzed by the immediate pain of restructuring, will likely fail. Their decisions will be clouded by sentiment, leading to half measures and compromises that ultimately prolong the agony and seal the company's fate. The truly effective turnaround leader, however, approaches the situation with strategic indifference. They analyze the company's core strengths and weaknesses, identify the critical areas for improvement, and implement a plan with cold, calculated precision. This may involve difficult decisions, layoffs, plant closures, and the dismantling of cherished but unprofitable projects. They understand that these actions, while painful in the short term, are necessary to ensure the long-term survival of the organization. They are not immune to the human cost, but they refuse to let their emotions dictate their strategy. Instead, they maintain a laser-like focus on the desired outcome, a healthy, profitable, and sustainable company. Their indifference is not born of malice, but of a clear-eyed understanding of the realities of the situation and an unwavering commitment to the greater good. They recognize that sentimentality has no place in strategic decision-making and that difficult choices must be made, regardless of the emotional fallout. Furthermore, the turnaround artist understands the power of setting a clear and unwavering vision. They communicate this vision to the organization, inspiring confidence and rallying support for the necessary changes. They are not afraid to make unpopular decisions, but they explain the rationale behind those decisions and demonstrate a genuine concern for the well-being of the employees who are affected. This combination of strategic indifference and empathetic leadership is crucial for success. It allows the leader to make the tough choices that are necessary to save the company, while also maintaining the trust and respect of the workforce. Without the ability to detach emotionally from the immediate consequences of their actions, the turnaround artist would be unable to make the difficult decisions required to turn the company around. They would be paralyzed by indecision, second-guessing their every move, and ultimately failing to deliver the results that are needed. The turnaround scenario exemplifies strategic indifference at its most brutal, a stark reminder that sentimentality and long-term survival are often incompatible. It also emphasizes that true strategic thinking sometimes necessitates actions that appear callous or even cruel, but are ultimately driven by a deeper sense of responsibility and a commitment to the greater good of the organization. The CEO's strategic indifference is not personal. It is a tool, a calculated detachment necessary for navigating treacherous terrain and ultimately achieving the desired outcome. Strategic indifference, therefore, isn't apathy. It's a calculated allocation of emotional energy. It means choosing where to invest your concern and, more importantly, where not. Two. It's about recognizing that every decision has a cost, and that sometimes the greatest cost is getting emotionally entangled in every detail. Consider the chess grandmaster, sacrificing a pawn to gain positional advantage. To the untrained eye, it might seem like a careless error, a sign of weakness. But the grandmaster sees the bigger picture. They understand that the temporary loss of a single piece is a necessary step towards a more significant victory. They are indifferent to the immediate setback, focused solely on the long-term strategic outcome. This is the essence of strategic indifference, prioritizing the ultimate objective over the fleeting emotional impulses of the moment. The ability to cultivate strategic indifference is not a natural talent. It is a skill that must be developed and honed through rigorous practice and self-discipline. It requires a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths, to accept that not everyone will agree with your decisions, and to remain steadfast in the face of criticism and opposition. It demands a deep understanding of your own emotions and the ability to control them, rather than being controlled by them. It necessitates a clear and unwavering commitment to your goals, and the ability to resist the temptation to be sidetracked by distractions or emotional appeals. In essence, strategic indifference is the art of focusing on what truly matters and letting go of what does not. It is the ability to see the forest for the trees, to prioritize the long-term strategic outcome over the immediate emotional cost. Moreover, strategic indifference isn't about being uncaring. True strategic indifference is underpinned by a cold, clear assessment of risk. It's not about ignoring suffering, but about understanding that attempting to alleviate every instance of it can ultimately lead to a worse outcome for everyone involved. It's the surgeon who knows that a painful incision is necessary to remove a tumor. They are not indifferent to the patient's pain, but they understand that the short-term discomfort is a small price to pay for the long-term benefit of saving their life. They understand that by focusing on the larger, strategic goal, eradicating the disease, they are ultimately acting in the patient's best interest. Similarly, the strategic leader must sometimes make difficult decisions that cause short-term pain in order to secure the long-term health and prosperity of the organization. The psychological toll of leadership can be immense. The constant pressure to make difficult decisions, the burden of responsibility for the livelihoods of others, and the inevitable criticism and scrutiny that come with the territory can all take their toll on the leader's mental and emotional well-being. Strategic indifference provides a crucial buffer against these pressures. It allows the leader to detach emotionally from the immediate consequences of their actions, to avoid becoming overwhelmed by the weight of their responsibilities, and to maintain a clear and objective perspective. It enables them to see the bigger picture, to focus on the long-term strategic goals, and to make the tough choices that are necessary to achieve those goals, without being paralyzed by fear, guilt, or regret. Strategic indifference is not about suppressing emotions. It's about channeling them, directing them towards a higher purpose. It's about transforming emotional energy into strategic action. Finally, strategic indifference provides the mental space needed for objective analysis. Emotional reactions cloud judgment. They amplify biases, obscure crucial data, and lead to rash decisions based on gut feelings rather than cold, hard facts. A leader drowning in the emotional fallout of a difficult choice cannot accurately assess the situation, anticipate future challenges, or formulate effective strategies. Strategic indifference creates the distance necessary to examine all options dispassionately, weigh the risks and rewards, and choose the course of action that offers the greatest probability of success, even if that course is unpopular or